Welcome back, everyone. It's Wendy De Rosa. I'm so glad you're here. And today's episode is called The Energetic Impact of Current Times and Our Responsibility to Our Collective and Personal Evolution. So, whether you identify as a sensitive, empath, or intuitive, most likely you feel quite a bit about what's occurring in globally and certainly in certain areas. I'm in typically United States centered, so often in the United States there's quite a destabilization going on. And I wanted to address how some of these issues really strike a chord deeper than we probably realize sometimes, that has more to do with the energy we hold in our bodies and the energy we experience on the collective level. And how do we take responsibility for our life and what our purpose is, so to speak, or what our dharma is, what we're going to live out on this planet. Um, I'm coming to this conversation from a perspective of being an intuitive energy healer who also teaches in the realm of spirituality, which in itself is a big umbrella. Um, and some of these concepts I wanted to talk about is that sometimes in the realm of spirituality, there's a shying away from issues that affect us on a human perspective and affect our humanity or our rights or politics or whatever might be going on in the world right now. And why I feel this is important to address is because as much as we want to stay in the spiritual perspectives about our human experience, empaths feel it. We feel the energy that is on that um, collective level. And I don't always believe that jumping to compassion or forgiveness or just riding it out is the answer. I believe that unpacking what is our experience, what's getting triggered in us, what is the gift and the doorway through our experience that, or through our triggers, through our what's being activated in us, what's that doorway through to our deeper healing? Because to me, as an intuitive energy healer, that's the embodied approach. That's the taking responsibility for what we hold and carry, and taking that journey into our deeper discovery, which could be about identifying what wounds we're holding. It also could be identifying more clearly what power we haven't tapped into yet that's needed on this planet. So for a long time now, I've been a healer for a long time. It's been 27 years. And I would say every year over the past decades, the words rise of consciousness. We're having a rise of consciousness. We're continuing to expand. And I remember the days when saying I was intuitive was such a closet comment. Like I would never say that. When someone says, well, what do you do for a living? I wouldn't say, oh, well, I'm an intuitive healer and I read energy and I tune in to see what's there. And and it just wasn't on the surface. I would say something more like consulting. I do consulting, and I would see how open people were in their responses, and I'd decide if I wanted to go further. But things are different, and we've had social media, and I've seen many, many people wake up online, have their ahas and awarenesses and expression online. And out of this, bigger reach, this is sort of an aside here, but out of our ability to globally connect has been a more global rise of consciousness. And what's important to recognize is consciousness in the body means that I am becoming aware. I mean, this is one aspect of consciousness, not the whole definition by any means, but I am becoming aware of the energy that was in my subconscious. I was perhaps blindfolded to it. I wasn't aware. It wasn't, I was moving through stages of survival or brain development or whatever it might have been through our growth. We only become aware when we're ready. And sometimes that means, aging and moving from child to adult, that we develop more consciousness. Well, the other aspect of this is understanding that when we become more conscious or aware, it also, in this rise of this experience, comes trauma. Rise of consciousness also means the awareness of the deep, dormant, subconscious traumas moving to the surface. And this is important because what it speaks to is how one of the doorways through to our spiritual growth and our joy and our freedom and our sense of, whatever it is, contentment in who we are, is actually through the healing process. And that includes healing our traumas, as opposed to stuffing those down, keeping them at bay, and seeking out all kinds of spiritual practices that might bypass these deeper traumas that are necessary for us to see and look at. And so as we experience this rise of consciousness, we're experiencing collective shame and personal shame. We're experiencing issues of having stuffed emotions deep under maybe the past, or emotions bottled up from the past that might reflect out in addiction or in some type of numbing, checking out, etc. We're experiencing on a collective level issues around systemic racism, of healthcare, of women's rights, of all different issues that we see on the surface, civil and human rights issues. And these issues haven't been not here. And in fact, many people have been advocating for these issues for years and years and years. But what is occurring for us has been this in the rise of consciousness comes the emerging of our deeply seated subconscious and suppressed traumas, collectively and personal, that have now bubbled up to the surface, and we navigate a world that is ultimately operating in some level of collective trauma right now. And that might be central to some areas of the world, maybe not everywhere. But we also have this online platform, or this, the internet as a megaphone, as a way for us to access visual images and information and news that would help us see, would give access to how much trauma we are personally or collectively moving through, that trigger our personal. Okay, so what I wanted to share here about this is that in the chakra system of our body, so this is where a big template that I speak from, because I believe in the information that our chakras will bring forward. And our chakras can serve as a template into understanding more about the power we carry and the history we carry. And if you've read my book, Becoming an Empowered Empath, this will be review. But our lower three chakras, the first, which is at the tailbone, the second, which is in the pelvis, and the third are our power centers that carry so much of our human experience, our history as a human being, and how we are navigating this human journey, how we are in relationship with safety and survival for ourselves, how we are in relationship with our own emotions and our own feminine energy, our own sexuality, our own creativity, our emotions, our passions, and how we're in relationship with our personal power, which includes our masculine energy. And this isn't gender. I'm talking about the power of energy in our body. And so it becomes such that when there is a collective trauma experience, that it triggers the personal experiences that stir for people, and what their, what their people have had to remember, meaning recall or subconsciously bring to the surface, not because they chose to or wanted to consciously, but because when there is conversation and energy starting to happen externally that is about traumas moving to the surface, then it's going to trigger the energy that we hold in these first three chakras and bring all our personal awareness of that up and to the surface. And it's really important that we take that time to recognize when there are collective traumas, it is going to address our personal issues. In the world today, we could take any day, any week, any collective trauma. Let's take the issue of Roe v. Wade being overturned for an example. So it becomes overturned as a Supreme Court decision. And out of that decision comes 67% of people who are opposed to, or who are pro-choice, who are opposed to this decision, have reactions in their system of trauma. They have, and just through my conversations, including myself, touched rage, touched disorientation, disconnection, have felt foggy, brain fog. It's a disorienting trauma to experience that many people all at the same time are having a response to what is occurring that essentially just changed history. And while there are many people, a lesser percentage, according to our national statistics, might have been for the shift, for this law to be, for it to be overturned, their response might be different. But I want to speak to what might be going on here energetically in our body, and why this might have been such an immense collective trauma. And I want to speak to it from an energetic perspective. So an abortion is traumatic, whether or not it was a conscious choice to have sex or whether it wasn't. Either way, to have an abortion is a traumatic experience. It's a trauma to the body. For a woman at any stage of pregnancy, very early on, it's a very disorienting time. Hormones are moving, brain chemistry is changing. It's a very confusing initially time. Your body feels sick. There's physiological changes in the body. And while I'm making a big generalization here, not all women make decisions to abort lightly. They're not lightly. They could have been, there could have been sleepless nights, stressed days, trying to figure out a decision. And this is as if it were conscious, if this was an accidental pregnancy. And it doesn't consider that some people, what I'm talking about is that some people wouldn't have even had that choice. There would have been perhaps sexual assault or abuse, or a pregnancy that is at risk to the child and the mother. But even if it were a conscious decision to have an abortion, the the process of doing such the woman would live through shame, would carry some element of shame to even have to, not because it's the right or wrong thing to do, but because society sees it as such. It's, it's in the construct. We're faced against decisions that are, or judgment that are, other people's energy, essentially, other people's thoughts and choices that they would make for themselves. But when the Roe v. Wade was overturned, the experience of women losing their body autonomy, their ability to make their own choices, the threat that would happen if they were ever in a situation where they would need an abortion, meaning there was an assault, there was a sexual abuse, there was a rape, there was something of some sort where they would need to have, they would have chosen to have an abortion because it's not, because the act itself was traumatic. The decision by the Supreme Court, what it ends up doing is stirring the personal trauma of women who have had this experience in their lives, not just looking at whether they had an abortion in the past, but looking at their own relationship to the people in their lives who they would be, again, that there would be conflict with. There's so many levels of trauma that it would stir for women in particular, men also, who might feel that their personal stories have now pushed to the surface of their being. It's gone from, wow, this was many years ago and I didn't even think about this, to today, all this energy that I didn't process over the years is now surfacing. And here I am holding an immense amount of trauma. And while we might say, well, I've heard this a lot in spiritual, or, sort of spiritual people saying, well, just ride this out, don't get bogged down by the negativity of, the Roe v. Wade being overturned. And when I hear things like that, what it's discounting is the fact that emotions are extraordinarily important. And in fact, they're so important that oftentimes it's at the root of why some of these laws even happen or they exist, because people are afraid of their own grief, or they're afraid of their own shame, or they're afraid of having to feel anything at a deep level and be vulnerable and and to be able to have a relationship to their anger. And so because we have such a massive issue around emotions on a very big systemic level, fear also is another one. Because we have such an immense issue with emotions, people will control. They will act out. They will project. They will try to do anything they can to stay in a power place, because vulnerability is too threatening and too scary for people to feel. And so when it came down to this Roe v. Wade, it was so glaring to me that a couple of episodes ago, I did one on the narcissist and the empath, a podcast, and it talked about the balance and imbalances between our masculine and feminine energy. And we're watching here with this particular issue, a power dynamic between the patriarchy, which is the wounded masculine. That's the part that dominates, controls, has fear, doesn't own up or take responsibility, stuffs things under the rug, tells, tries to control ultimately. And then the feminine, the wounded feminine that becomes victimized by the wounded masculine. And so here we are watching this happen here. It's not just watching it, it's experiencing it. And it starts to point to within our bodies all the years that we have grown up with the wounded masculine, with the patriarchy, dominating and controlling, and the feminine within us, no matter our gender, being suppressed. And here we are experiencing this, male dominated, it was not all male, but it's the Supreme Court patriarchy. And there's women in that patriarchy too, who are making a decision over the feminine, the women's bodies, and women energetically being pushed down, rights taken away, that there is a suppression on a deep level. And anytime we experience a suppression on any level, it's either going to be a trauma response in that we stuff or we go numb or we shut down on some level, or the opposite, we rage, we become enraged. In this case, becoming enraged is an experience that says that my rights and my humanity there has been a boundary crossing. Ultimately, that's what it means. I am here in my center as who I am. This is who I am. I am authentically me. I am authentically this gender. I am authentically, my color, my skin color. This is who I am. And when someone says your rights, you are not allowed to be you. There is laws. It's illegal on some level, or not even that it isn't illegal in some cases. It's just hated. That people will have some level of response, trauma response, and rage is that experience of saying, I have to, in my energetic system, the emotions in my body are going to outburst when something doesn't feel right, when it touches that deep sense of injustice internally. This is in the energetic system of very much our first and second and third chakras. Root chakra is actually justice. It is the seat of fairness and balance, grounding, security, that sense of stability inside ourselves. Second chakra is the power of our feminine. It's also our emotions, and it's also the power of choice in the second chakra, that we can choose for our deep, authentic being, our way of being, what is true for us. That is a power of the second chakra. The third chakra is our personal power. When someone now says your rights are taken away and you aren't allowed to, like who you are is inferior, we'll say it that way, inferior on many levels, then it's an ego blow. It's an indent to our sense of living in the world as an integrated human being, as being able to be ourselves. We have to censor on some level who we are if what's around us is threatening or unsafe. This also, believe it or not, the feminine in the second chakra and root chakra area of the body ties into systemic racism. This is where bodies of color, people of color, are also living in the energetic, in their bodies, but in the energetic system. This is where that impact of the patriarchy has suppressed on such a deep level that there is anger, there is shutdown, there is rage, there is fear, there is a sense of who I am in my body, in my skin, in who I'm authentically, what I came into this world to be. It's not okay. And it's not true that it's not okay, but the societal structures say it's not okay, or give that impression at least. So what are we experiencing in the world right now when we talk about this immense current times, the chaos of the current times? It's ultimately a destabilization of the systems. It's a rise of the feminine. It is that sense of saying that what had not been okay, or I'll say it this way, what has been stuffed down deeply suppressed and controlled, is rising, and it's pissing people off who have been in that controlled place, that controlling place. And so, there is a bearing down, there is a sense of, well, we're going to suppress even more. We're going to, hone in. And this is my intuitive sense of it all on that energetic level, because this experience here that we are living through is an absolute contraction as we're living on this trajectory of continued spiritual expansion and moving more towards an era of truth and alignment and existence. It's just not going to be pretty getting there. We are living the contraction right now, and we have choices in this contraction. As much as it feels like it's going to get worse, where we don't have choice in this, there is choice. And the choice is that we have that capacity on a sensitive, empathic, intuitive level to continue to work on your own personal impact, trauma, and energy. And the reason I say that, which sometimes honestly can sound like a dismissal of responsibility, of the collective's responsibility or the patriarchy's responsibility. But I want to be clear about this, is that if your traumas are taking you down, if you are exhausted, if you are getting sick, if you are shutting down on some level, you are of no service to yourself or to anyone. And so it's really important that we do work on our own healing and traumas we hold personally as they get triggered by what's occurring in the collective. And what that means is that, yes, we can point out there at what's going on that is absolutely unfair, not okay, and unjust. And I feel that way a lot, on any given day when there's gun violence, or when there's, this, laws that are in place that create suppression for people. And the responsibility to say, okay, I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to do what I need to do on this planet to contribute in the way that I'm here to show up in this world. And that might include advocating. That might include advocacy on some level, showing up and helping where you can help, giving voice to what needs to be said, needs to be spoken, can't stay suppressed anymore. We need advocacy for those reasons. And advocacy is the human spirit shifting consciousness on this planet. And it's absolutely a grounded aspect of spirituality. So we do need advocacy for that, and that ability to take responsibility for our emotions and for our traumas that surface. And the second part of this is that as we do have advocacy and we do speak up, and we do either take whatever steps that might be supported out there, it's important for us to recognize that sometimes being in community or having someone or people to co-regulate with and recognize that we're not alone in our experience, that other people feel similarly to how we feel, and we're moving forward towards advocating for shift and change, and we're, taking care of our own energy, but we have boots on the ground, we have feet on the earth, in addition to prayer, in addition to higher consciousness. It's that sense of, I need to be in relationship and in regulation, co-regulation with people, and know that I'm not alone. And these steps that I'm taking for my human spirit on this earth are going to be a combination of my spiritual work, my soul work, and my human footprint, how I'm here to show up. And so it's really important that we do understand that the collective experience is going to trigger our lower 3 chakras in particular. It'll trigger our heart and our throat, but the heart chakra tends to be responsive to how we are embodied in the lower half of our body. I personally believe that we are called to be more embodied in spirituality. And interestingly enough, I come from a history of yoga, and yoga is the embodiment, but depending on how you practice it, but it is the embodiment because it has spiritual concepts and philosophy with it, but there is an integration into the physical body, that we're opening up the meridians in the body, that we're moving through personal responsibility in our lives and how we walk on this earth. I believe sometimes, and I dwell in the realm of spiritual work, but I really believe that sometimes there are concepts in spirituality that will bypass taking responsibility for these lower chakras and the humanity that we have lived through and that we are living in. And that is important for us. It's important that we become more embodied. I grew up in a religion, Catholicism being the religion, where God is shunned out of your second chakra. I mean, sexuality is a shamed experience, even talking about it or addressing it. And therefore, because it's not integrated, there have been, as we all know, throughout the Catholic Church experience, there's been shadow experiences around sexuality. Anytime we live with the suppression of the feminine, that's the second chakra energy, sexual energy, that suppression of the feminine, it's going to go out sideways. It's got to find an outlet. It's going to act out on some level in vices or in harm to self or harm to others. So we've in this, my experience growing up around it, I had that awareness that, spirituality is about the heart and the third eye and the crown. This is my language now. It wasn't back then. It's about staying above the issues. It's not about embodying our truth and embodying our sensuality and our emotions and our sexuality and our gender, if you even want to identify with a gender. Some people don't. And that's an aspect of freedom and choice in the body. But this sense of, I get to drop in to myself and be embodied here is a direction that our spiritual work needs to take us to. And that happens through the healing process. It doesn't happen always by conceptualizing or disconnecting, or even it doesn't happen by what I'd say is taking the high road from the perspective of disregarding it, bypassing it, not owning it or taking responsibility for it. Essentially, another way of saying it is just living in love and light. As healers on the earth, as spiritual empaths, sensitives, intuitives, spiritual meaning you have a soul, you have a spirit in this body. We have to understand how to be in this body, live in this body. So it's important in this energetic experience of current times that we take responsibility for our own two things. One is our own issues that surface because of what we experience in the collective, that we heal. And on the other side is that we take action in the world according to our deeper truth, that we show up in the world, we use our voice, we express ourselves in the ways that come from who we are and why we're here. And I know it's hard. It feels like any given day, it can feel hopeless, helpless. And I just want to remind you, as we navigate collective trauma and a lot of intense energy on the planet, that you do have people, there are people and communities where people can come together and feel held and supported. And sometimes just that act of coming together and feeling held and supported gives people a place to land inside themselves and gives them hope to keep going. So what I'd like to do is just give you a little brief meditation to help you settle in your body from this information. So you can feel your sit bones and your grounding cord strong from your hips to the earth. And take a deep breath. Continue breathing here as you lean back into your waterfall of grace, of divinity. And let that light come all the way down to your tailbone and your pelvis and your solar plexus region. Take a deep breath into this area of your body. And exhale fully and completely. Take another deep inhale in, and on your exhale, you're going to let energy release down your grounding cord. Anything in these lower chakras that feel like it's ready to go today. Tension, fear, guilt, shame, anger, or anything else. And coupled with this releasing breath of sending energy down your grounding cord deep into the earth where it's transformed, we're also going to add sending anybody's energy back to themselves that you don't need to have or hold or carry, for all space, time, and dimension. Sending everybody back, clearing your space. And then we'll add to this, as you continue breathing, a calling of your energy back from anyone it might be with or anywhere it might be wandering. May it come back here. And then from that inflow of grace through your body, may the light start to fill you up from the inside out so that you are taking up space in yourself, radiating out. That the soul, your soul within your body, is fully embodied and grounded here with strength and capacity to stand in yourself and with yourself as a spiritual being, as a soul in this human experience. And through your radiance, may you have strong energetic boundaries. And I pray for light to surround you fully and completely. May you be protected and supported as you go forward throughout your day. I give thanks for this opportunity to be of service. I pray that we continue to walk in the love and the light of who we are, and that we may be guided by our own true hearts every step of the way. And thank you. Thank you, everyone, so much. And I hope you enjoy this episode. If you are looking for a community to receive guided healings with me live, please join my School of Intuitive Studies membership, schoolofintuitivestudies.com, and you can become a member, and then we can connect every month inside the membership. I look forward to seeing you soon.